How are Louisville homeless providers dealing with COVID 19, and where do LGBTQ people fit into that equation? We're starting a series of conversations today, beginning with Natalie Harris, the Executive Director of the Coalition for the Homeless here in Louisville. But first, we're also going to look at how artists are adapting to a virtual setting. And we start that conversation with Remy Sisk from Acting Against Cancer. Welcome to Community Conversations with Louisville Pride, part of our Digital Pride initiative. Digital Pride is brought to you by Republic Bank, Norton Healthcare, Connolly Law Offices, Caperton Realty, and Heine Brothers Coffee. Today, we're talking with Remy Sisk from Acting Against Cancer about how artists are adapting to a virtual setting. Remy's been the executive director at Acting Against Cancer for about 2 years now. So thank you for joining me, Remy.
Thank you for having me.
So first off, can you tell us a little bit about Acting Against Cancer?
Yes, Acting Against Cancer is a nonprofit semi-professional theater company that is dedicated to changing the lives of children touched by cancer through the arts. So we do big main stage musicals throughout the community all year long. And then we also do after-school children's programming where we teach kids musical theater twice a week for 2 different age groups. And then any child who is touched by cancer gets to do those programs for free as we're trying to help them explore the healing power of the arts and what getting on stage can do for both your physical and mental health.
It sounds like you've said that before.
Not those exact words, but that general idea, yes, definitely.
So I assume presumably all programming is on hold for the time being, right?
Well, sort of. Yeah, that's kind of the thing. It was officially on hold. When the virus hit, we were in the middle. We were actually about to go into Tech Week. The first real stay-at-home week would have been Tech Week for Murder Ballad, which was the final show of our season. So that certainly went on hold and is still on hold. Our children's program, they are semester long, so they were almost halfway through the spring semester. They were working on 2 individual shows. The elementary school and middle school kids were working on 2 different shows. Those are both on hold, but we actually just recently restarted a virtual way of doing kids programming. So we're doing some, but most stuff is still on hold. Yeah.
Yeah, I had forgotten that you all were in that. There was that week of everything was canceling, and for some of us it was a lot easier. We didn't have anything big going on, but then you all were really just getting ready to open that, and that must have been.
And it was really tough because, the week that people started to cancel things, I feel like it was still so unknown. So we thought we were far enough away from it that we were like, oh, we're good. So like we put out,
this will be over.
We are going on. Everything's going to be fine. And obviously like with that, at that point in time, things were changing like by the hour. So like a day and a half or something later, we were like, just kidding, it's not happening. But I really respected those who really took a stand immediately. Theater 502, I think, was the first one I saw that formally postponed, and I was really impressed they were able to take that seriously so quickly and take some really strong action. So I think there was a lot of stewardship in the arts world immediately to be sure to be on the right side of history and make sure that everyone was being safe in a time when everything was so unknown.
Well, it goes against the fundamental maxim of theater, which is the show must go on. That's what we always say.
Exactly.
And it's like, well, not if the theater's on fire.
Yeah, maybe not this time.
Right.
We'll go on eventually.
So what does that mean, for you all financially? Is that, how big of a hit is that?
Well, so not only was Murder Ballad going, obviously it was the 3rd show of our main stage. It was a big revenue source. We do Rocky Horror now every spring as well as October. And that was supposed to be like the 1st or 2nd weekend of April. So obviously that didn't happen. And then the kids shows, which are ticket sales and concessions and all that, program ads, that should have happened last weekend, actually. So there were a lot of revenue sources that we completely did not have, and we are still paying rent at ArtSpace, and we're still paying the people that work for us. So it's been really tough, and it's been financially devastating. But I'm not kidding myself to think that AAC is the only nonprofit affected or the only arts organization affected. We're all in this together, and I think that we're all just trying to do the best we can to stay afloat. I have seen some organizations do some really cool, innovative stuff, and I think that I hope at least that when we are all past this, we are able to look back and see how we were able to do things that we never would have done otherwise because we never would have been in the position to do so. So, they say humans are so adaptable, and I think that's very true. And while live theater has essentially been taken from all of us, the fact that we are without this thing that we, for instance, live and breathe and depend on, we are forced to find new artistic ways to bring people together, bring the community together, to express ourselves. So I hope that, we'll be able to remember the good and the discoveries and innovation that was made. But, right now, yeah, it's tough and financially difficult. And we are so blessed to have so many incredible, generous donors in the community who are looking out for us, who care about us. The Fund for the Arts initiatives have been helpful. People just generally maintaining arts awareness on social media is helpful. So I think as long as we don't forget the arts, we'll make it through this together.
Are you all able to start planning and thinking about when you'll be live again, or is that
Dude,
just kind of on hold?
I really wish. I saw like phase 3, Bashir's phase 3 is groups of 50 or more, and that is, tentatively July-ish supposed to be a thing, and who knows how close you can be. So Murder Ballad will be the next show we do. I saw the designer run of it, and it was extraordinary. Like, it has to happen. The show is so good. But obviously, the idea of bringing people sitting next to each other, even one chair apart, doesn't seem to be in the immediate future, much less some of our bigger shows that are 150, 200 people. So I don't know. I hope that we see a really positive trajectory, and then being able to think about main stage live programming in the fall becomes something we really can do. But right now we're just trying not to make any decisions that we'll just have to undo later. So it's really stressful for I'm sure all arts organizations, and I think all we can do is just play it by ear and know that we're all on the same team and the same page and just doing the best we can.
Of course, I mean, as somebody who's been in the arts, for 20 years or so, I've been in a lot of shows and to a lot of shows that were less than 50 people. So
Yeah.
we might be okay, actually.
Yeah.
That's the upside of that.
Been there for sure.
So tell me a little bit about some of the adaptive programming you all are doing, both officially and unofficially.
Yeah. Yeah. So the kids has been something really neat that our teaching artist, Miranda Thomas, who also acts in our main stage shows, she and I have been working really hard to develop something that we think will be meaningful for the kids as well as, fun. So they are going to be doing I think we're calling it a virtual cabaret or a virtual review. I don't know the official name yet, but they were charged with finding songs that were meaningful to them in this time, songs maybe that got them through a hard day, songs they like to sing, songs that take their mind off things, and work with me and Miranda to find one, and then we're going to meet one-on-one with them for coaching sessions twice, and then they're going to record themselves doing their song at home, and then we'll put it all together into one program and then stream it in a couple weeks so the families can see and relatives can see, and hopefully it's sort of like seeing their kids at a performance, but not the same. But something that we're actually really excited about with this new option is that a lot of parents have asked us, when my daughter needs voice lessons, can you all do that with her? And between my and Miranda's full-time jobs, plus our work with AAC, plus main stage rehearsals, we don't have the time to really take on one-on-one coaching strategies. So we're hoping that this new avenue to finish out the semester will actually allow the kids opportunity to grow and develop in ways that only sort of one-on-one coaching can give. So we're hoping that brings them some new level of understanding of musical theater, while also giving them a chance to really express themselves through their song selection. Hopefully a song that really resonates with them, and they can start to understand what it's like to channel yourself through artistic performance, not just sing a song someone else wrote because I'm playing this role, but rather singing this song because it means something to me. So that's what we're doing with the kids, and we're really excited about it. And I hope that I know that it'll be really a special thing. For the adults, this is sort of, I don't want to say it's secret because it's not, but we're not like promoting it a ton because we kind of want it to be a little bit of a surprise. But we are working on I'm calling it a virtual musical. I guess that's what it is. Truly, it's a virtual musical where people are recording themselves independently, singing songs, doing choreography on their Zoom, and then it'll just be edited together and streamed live. And that one's more of just a silly thing. I got the idea when it was like 6:30 p.m. I was like done with work. I like worked out and I was done. I was like, I should be going to rehearsal. Like that is what I do at night. So I was like, I need to find a way to rehearse something. So we're doing this show and it's going to be really silly and dumb, but I hope it's something that makes people smile and just take their mind off of the claustrophobia I think a lot of people are feeling, not being able to leave and not being able to go to a rehearsal environment, which for a lot of people, especially me, is one of my favorite places to be. So that's sort of what we're doing in the meantime. I'm hoping that we can start to make, like you were saying, formal plans for coming together live again. But in the meantime, this is the best I got.
Let me ask you about that for both the kids and the adults. You know, how much of a difference does it make to not be in the same room with people, even though you're still really doing the same work? How much of a difference does that make?
Well, with the kids, we haven't started the coaching sessions yet. So Miranda and I are really looking forward to seeing what that's like. But, it's like not even a little bit the same. It's great. And I love that it keeps people engaged in the arts, and obviously it's all we can do. But, theater and coming together to rehearse theater has been such an important part of my life as far as me developing my own skills and abilities on the surface, but then also relationships and sitting next to each other and talking when you're going to the water fountain or something. And I think that the energy you feel in a rehearsal room that drives you to create is totally gone. Instead, you're grappling with like shaky Wi-Fi and unstable connection and what's your background and my dog's barking. So, it keeps it going and it keeps the arts alive, but it's not the same. And I think that more than anything, it re-emphasizes, at least it has to me, how incredibly grateful I am to have the arts in my life and how I've certainly taken them for granted because I never knew life without them. And now here I am without having a rehearsal to go to. I've been doing a show like back to back, as in always in a rehearsal for like the last 4 years, I think. So this is the first period of time where I haven't had a rehearsal to go to, and it really has emphasized to me how lucky I am to have that in my life. And while we're not in the same room, we can still create. How fortunate I will feel to be able to get back in the true creative space.
Tell me a little bit about apocalypse baking. I don't know if that qualifies as art, but
yeah. So that is apocalypse baking is what me and the 3 people who are quarantined here in my house are doing. My fiance Charlie, obviously, and then Michael and Sarah. We're all here. And anyone who knows the 4 of us as like an operating group knows that we will always bring the party. Like we are ready to have fun. We're ready to be wild. Like we are always up for something fun. So one night, probably like when I discovered the idea for the virtual musical, like I was just kind of bored. And Sarah and I were like, what if we like baked a dessert tonight? Like let's bake something like pretty, like that's on Nailed It or something. And then Sarah or me, one of us was like, oh my God, we should like make a Nailed It. We should like film us baking something that's gonna go horribly wrong. I was like, let's do it. All right, let's do it. And we did, and we streamed it, I think, on my Instagram live. And it was funny and dumb. And like, I was like, what are we even doing? But whatever, let's do it again. So we did it again, and then a third time. And then we started like to go to Facebook Live because like it was just more stable connection and stuff. And people started watching it, and particularly obviously our theater friends who know us and know our antics. And now we do it twice a week, Monday and Thursday. At the end of each episode, we like randomly select a theme and the two people who will be competing the next time. And it's really fun. So what I love about it is, like, I feel like a lot of people see Facebook Lives or Instagram Lives of them doing something as, you know, vain and just sort of like a vanity project and like, look at me and notice me. And that is like not at all what we're trying to do. We are truly, one, trying to entertain ourselves. Like, this is just fun and silly. We like get dressed up in theme. We make something crazy. It always goes wrong. But then also our thing is, like, if we can make one person, just one person smile who might be feeling really horrible at that moment, is beyond worth it. So the fact that we actually can bring joy to people is everything we could have ever wanted with this. And it's like, I mean, we're getting like consistently more views, which is pretty wild and exciting, because it's really just us being our stupid selves. But I love that this is actually something people are starting to look forward to. Like, we have some friends who tell us, like, we're on every day and it actually gives me something I really can smile about each night. And I'm like, that's great. I love that we were able to hopefully take people's minds off of this sort of doom feeling that I feel like a lot of people are experiencing. So it's been fun. We're still at it. We've got an episode tomorrow.
What's tomorrow's theme?
Well, it was supposed to be Chromatica, which is the new Lady Gaga album, but Charlie, who's a major fan, thinks we should wait until that album comes out because now there's a release date for the end of the month. So we might change it. I don't know. I'm really trying to get a Schitt's Creek theme going. That's my new primary focus, but we'll see what it'll be. I'm not sure yet.
Well, good luck with that. It sounds like
Thank you.
it's, it really is exactly what we're talking about with the arts of, giving something to people to brighten their day and help them through difficult times. And, it's one of the real weird parts of this whole crisis is that so many of the things that we do to make us feel better about bad times are taken away from us right now.
Yeah.
We can't go see a show. We can't hug each other. We can't do all these things that people are used to. So we're all kind of adapting in the best we can.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other words of wisdom before we close out?
No, I mean, I think that it's been a great conversation just to remember that in all the pain and the heartache that I think has gone along with this time, it's really awesome to see what people have done to make the most out of it and maybe discovered things within themselves or within the group of people they're quarantined with that they wouldn't have otherwise. So keeping a focus on the positive is, I think, what's going to get us through this hopefully home stretch that we're in at this crazy time.
Well, thank you very much for joining me, Remy, and also thank you for loaning me these curtains, which make my office look like a much more professional studio than it is.
Well, the theater does not need those right now, so they're yours till we're back.
Taking good care of them on my PVC backdrop here. Well, thank you very much, and good luck with the baking tomorrow.
Thank you. I will definitely lose. Oh wait, I'm not baking, so it's on them. Thank you so much, Mike.
Bye.
Bye.
Welcome to Community Conversations with Louisville Pride, part of our Digital Pride initiative. I want to thank the sponsors that make Digital Pride possible: Republic Bank, Norton Healthcare, Connolly Law Offices, Caperton Realty, and Heine Brothers Coffee. Today we're talking about homelessness and COVID-19, and my guest is Natalie Harris, who is the Executive Director for the Coalition for the Homeless and has been in that role for 10 years. She started on April Fool's Day and just had her 10-year anniversary, so congratulations on that. Thank you for joining me today, Natalie. Can you tell me, before we get started, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off as you were thanking me for thanking you. Can you tell me a little bit before we get started about, the role of the coalition and just kind of the overview of the homeless issue in Louisville and the providers and what's the map look like under normal circumstances?
So the Coalition for the Homeless is the overarching entity that tries to coordinate the efforts of all the different agencies that serve homeless people. And that list is over 30 agencies, and it includes those that you would think of quickly, like the day shelters and our night shelters. But we also have many agencies that serve the homeless you don't necessarily think of. There is legal aid for the homeless. We have healthcare for the homeless. And lots of service agencies and outreach workers that go out on the streets to help people who have are not able to either even get into shelter, much less housing, or may choose not to stay in shelter because they either have issues with a congregate facility or feel like those places are unsafe, and so they decide instead to stay outside. And we, on any given year, have about 7,000 to 8,000 people who become homeless at some point in time in the city. We have about 1,500 people on any given night that we are able to pinpoint and know where they are that are homeless, mostly in the shelter system. But that also includes a couple hundred people that we can identify, and we know that's only a portion of the people that are outside on the streets. We do know that this year we had an increase in homelessness in the numbers that we can identify. A lot of that is because the city invested money at the beginning of that year to do more outreach to homeless people on the streets. And because Wayside, through that funding, was able to open a 100-bed facility for people to be able to come in that had been on the streets. So we know that we are able to identify more homeless people this year. We don't know if that means there are more homeless people on the streets and now coming into shelter, or if we just weren't able to identify those people because they weren't getting served before. The other thing is that you might think that COVID would result in us having a higher rate of homelessness in the city. But at this point, and we all have to remember, we're really early in COVID. It doesn't look like there's an end coming in a couple of months. So at this point, the numbers have actually gone down because there have been resources brought into the community to address the situation, to get people off the streets, to get more people into housing that have been on waiting lists, especially those most vulnerable. And so we're actually seeing a decrease in homelessness in the city, and we hope that that will continue and that those resources will continue to be there.
That's certainly good news. The Wayside facility you mentioned, is that the low barrier shelter that was in the news quite a bit?
Yes, they opened, it was like right at Christmas time. And when they first opened, they opened the facility for as many people as wanted to come in, especially during that extreme cold temperature we had that winter. They had numbers up to 160, 180 in a given night in that one facility. They did realize that just for the safety of everyone, that they needed to limit the numbers to smaller numbers within that. It's an old gymnasium. And so since then, the facility has been completely full at 100 people since it opened. And they have not had any nights when they have had vacancies.
So what are some of the challenges for housing people in the low barrier setting and then in the more traditional settings? And what are some of those barriers? And then how does that change with COVID and with social distancing and people being sick and things like that? What's the situation like today?
Well, when you start to think about somebody who has reached the point where they have to sleep on the streets or in a shelter, those are people who have very few resources. So you usually don't immediately end up homeless. So most people already live in a very poor situation. They're, just making it paycheck to paycheck or disability check to disability check. Those families tend to not have a lot of other family that can support them. Or if they do, they can support them in some ways, but not financially, because they also are poor. And then you usually still need additional extenuating circumstances. So I think all of us know people in our own families who have domestic violence, who have drug issues, who have drinking problems, who have a mental health issue, all those different things. But if you're already living this check to this check, and then those things add to it, and then you have an additional crisis like your car breaks down, or you have a physical health issue and have to go to the hospital and have a huge bill. All those things usually are on the backs of people who are homeless. A lot of times people will just give up. And so a lot of times you really have to convince people that they can do it and that we have the resources to help them. And in a system that is broken, it's hard to do that, to get people to trust you, because a lot of times it takes a long time to get through the whole housing situation. Your options for housing are not the greatest, and definitely your options for shelter. Although we could not live without the shelters that are here in our community. They're crowded, and there are a lot of people all in one space, with their own issues that you're all living with day to day. So people don't necessarily have the greatest options when they're trying to build themselves back up.
And you said the system is broken. What are some of the things that are broken about it, and are there pieces that can be fixed easier than other pieces?
When I was a young person, our government was spending $84 billion a year on housing. And there were issues with a lot of that housing. At that point, we were building large public housing structures that tended to cause problems also because, again, we were congregating so many people within one building that had problems. But we didn't have family homelessness. We didn't have the kinds of problems we have with housing now. And we have stopped investing in housing in this country since the 70s, the 1970s. And over that time period, it has built up, and we are now in a housing crisis. We have over 30,000 people in our city who can't afford just the basic rent for a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. And even those people who are working and making, $8 to $10 an hour cannot afford that housing. And we have enough subsidy in housing for about 25% of the people who need it. And so that whole system was not, we a couple of months ago looked at our city and the incomes of people in our city. And our system is basically built to address the needs of about 3/4 of the Louisville citizens. The rest of those people, many of whom who work very low wage jobs and have few benefits, can't afford a car. That citizenry, which is 1/4 of our citizens, cannot afford to live even in what many of us call a very affordable city. Because they just don't make enough money to do that.
For COVID-19, what sort of things do service providers prepare for, right? I mean, people know that there's going to be tornadoes, there's going to be floods. Was this the sort of thing that there was any sort of preparation for, or was this just kind of totally unpredictable?
Yeah, I would say that our city in general, and I don't think it was just Louisville, this was a problem across the country, was completely unprepared. Even when you look at the city planners in public health in our community, they were completely unprepared for this. For the first few weeks of COVID, there was no one leading the effort saying, here's what we're going to do at the shelters. That's why our shelters have created different policies, because they on their own had to pretty much decide, are we going to limit the number of people who stay here? Are we going to allow new people to come in? And what rules do we need to put in place for new people? Are we going to allow people to go out and come back during the day? There were no policies established on what was the best practice and how to deal with that, at least for the first 3 weeks of the crisis. And we even, when agencies were unable to even get cleaning products, so they were making their own cleaning products because you could not order or get at the local stores cleaning products. And that doesn't even talk about the fact that they couldn't get thermometers, they couldn't get masks, they couldn't get gloves. And so we weren't prepared. They weren't prepared for that kind of need. Those were not things they normally needed. And our community was not prepared to be able to provide them. And for those who listen to the Governor every night, you know, that wasn't unique to Louisville. It was something that, you know, none of us were able to deal with. Within about 3 weeks, the public health department started to get involved in the shelter system, and the Resilience and Community Services Department of the city was already, they early on decided to host weekly calls with the shelter, so at least they knew what was happening. And so because they had that information, public health and others who've been with FEMA and other agencies have been able to kind of create some policies to help those agencies figure out what to do as things happen.
And is there a need for volunteers and donations at the shelters, or is it safe for people to volunteer?
Most of the shelters have limited volunteers or people who come in and out for short periods of time. Most of the shelters have long-term volunteers who may have committed to stay, as well as staff. I know personally of homeless shelter staff who worked for over 30 days straight without a break, because they did have to let some people who had children, some people who had health issues go home but for their own safety. And that meant that they were short-staffed. They couldn't call on lots of volunteers, some of whom are seniors or have health issues of their own, to come in and carry that weight. So the shelters have really worked hard. They're tired, they're scared, and they, you know, we all owe them the same kind of praise that we've been giving healthcare workers and grocery store workers and those other people who have been working crazy hours to keep people safe.
Along those lines, you know, how important is it to take care of this population? I mean, I think there's an assumption amongst people that, you know, when we talk about homeless people, we're talking about some folks that live under a bridge and are outcasts. But if we're saying that there's 7,000 to 8,000 people a year that are experiencing homelessness, a lot of those people are working, right? A lot of those people are interacting with everybody else. And if this is a population where if COVID-19 is unchecked, it could spread very, very rapidly.
Yeah, so most of the shelters have created policies now where they are sheltering in place. I think at least 2 of the shelters still are only operating overnight, and then people leave during the day and come back in. But all the other shelters have decided to, if you come in, you stay in, unless you have some kind of a waiver. And so somebody who is going to work, they would allow that person to go to work. They would ask that person to practice all the safety things that all of us are being asked to do, to wear a mask and gloves and whatever when you're going to work, as much as possible. And they are testing people's temperatures on a regular basis, watching for symptoms on the regular basis. And thanks to Family Health Centers and Salvation Army, an additional space was opened up that allows, if there's somebody who does have symptoms, they can be sent to be tested. And while they're waiting to find out about their test, and then even if they are found positive, there is space that is owned by the Salvation Army for those people to isolate during that time period.
How do you think this situation is going to impact shelter operations in the medium term future? You know, we've we've gotten used to it a little bit. It's not going away anytime soon. What does the next year look like for shelters?
Well, I talked about the fact that there are additional resources right now to get people into housing. And I think that is something we should learn from. Our staff have been talking about, isn't this amazing? Just like we've always said, we knew the answer to homelessness, it's money to get people into housing. And so we have been able, with a partnership through the Housing Authority, to get people into vacant units at public housing. The Resilience and Community Services Department has allocated money that usually goes for employment programs through the Community Services Block Grant to put people, and mostly families, into into hotels, so that they can be safe during this time period and not have to go into large congregate facilities. We also have had a priority for people who are on the streets who already have health issues, to get them off the streets and into either hotels or housing. And so we have been able to get more people off the wait list, and especially the family wait list. Louisville is one of the only communities across the country that has more shelter for individuals than for families. And so because we have such a dearth of shelter for families, that's a group that we've really worried about, and the city has really circled around, and we now are down to 0 on that waiting list. So it shows us it can be done if we're willing to put the resources there. And so we hope that that will continue. And we've also been advocating with the city to use a portion of the COVID CARES money that went to Louisville to make sure new people don't come into homelessness because they're unable to pay their rent during this crisis. So we're advocating for $30 million from all the different city funds that were made available to them and from their own funding, at a minimum, to go to housing people who may lose that housing because they haven't been able to pay rent.
That's a really important consideration, because as the economic impact of this sort of ripples through, we're going to see more of that. And it'll be interesting to see if the resources, the One Louisville Fund, the community ministries, are helping a lot of people with their rent and mortgage. And we got the one-time stimulus payment, but does that, once we're 3 months down the road, if the economy hasn't picked up, what are we going to be looking at? My last question for you is, for ending or reducing homelessness or ending it completely, what is it that needs to be done? And I think I know the answer from what you just said, but.
Yeah, so we definitely need a big focus on affordable housing. And what is affordable for me is very different from what is affordable to someone else. So we need a range of housing, but we need a real focus on housing for people who make below 30% of area median income. And so we're talking about people who make $16,000 a year, $18,000 a year. And, we'll talk about, that person makes $8 an hour. But when you calculate that out, it's really hard to imagine what is it like to try to live on $16,000 to $18,000 a year. And a lot of people do it, but we are really putting them in a precarious position because they can't afford any one thing that would cause them to not be able to pay their rent.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got to have either more subsidies or more housing units that are built to be affordable originally, so that those people are not falling in and out of homelessness.
I said that would be my last question, but I want to follow up with, is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, is that making a difference?
It is, but we would need a lot more. We've lost so much over so many years that we really will need a lot more to catch up to that number. And then last year, because of the budget crisis, the trust fund was cut in half to $5 million. Because we have a continuation budget right now, we don't know what will finally end up happening with the budget. That's the amount that it would continue at. So we'll need a lot more than $5 to $10 million a year if we're going to catch up to decades of disinvestment in affordable housing. And especially the Affordable Housing Trust Fund was set up to serve people all the way up to 50% of area median income in some programs. And then some of the other housing programs in the city go up to 80%. So while there is some trickle down by creating some of those other units, the group that is most desperate, it costs a lot more to build units that are going to be affordable to them.
Well, thank you very much for joining me today to talk about these important issues. Is there anything else you want to share before we leave?
No, I just think the most important thing for people to know is how committed the shelters are in the city. They have been working through whatever scares that they might see of, finding out that somebody who's been in their shelter did have COVID. They haven't had testing like they need to be able to know who does and doesn't have it. And their dedicated staff are still there every day, making sure people are safe, testing or checking temperatures, checking on people's symptoms, and then making sure people are fed and kept safe in our city. And so they all deserve such a hand for what they're doing.
Yes, absolutely. We're very grateful to have all those people working with us to help make Louisville a better place. I was talking to the mayor the other day about the work on and the focus on compassion and resilience, and how I think this is the sort of situation where that really comes into focus of how important those values are. Thank you, Natalie Harris from the Coalition for the Homeless, for joining me today for this community conversation. I want to thank the sponsors that make Digital Pride possible: Republic Bank, Norton Healthcare, Heine Brothers Coffee, Connolly Law Offices, and Caperton Realty. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Be sure to come back next time. We're going to continue the conversation around homelessness with the Salvation Army and Sweet Evening Breeze, talking about LGBTQ youth homelessness. And we're going to continue to talk to different artists in fields as different as poetry, dance, and theater to see how they're adapting to the virtual setting we've all been launched into. Thank you very much.